My name is Eimear McCurry. I manage a customer solutions engineering team across Northern and Central Europe. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about this really important topic of mobile web speed. Not just about the topic itself, but how it can affect your bottom line. And believe me, it will affect your bottom line. So take a look at this typical mobile website loading here. Just take a second to think about how this makes you feel. So that was 7 seconds. 7 seconds is the average time it takes for a US mobile website in the retail sector to load. Now, I don't know about you, but that made me pretty frustrated. And as a user, I don't know if I'm going to wait to buy from that site. So think about yourselves as a user, as a customer. Do you have the time and the patience to wait a full 7 seconds for that to load? In fact, we ran a poll, and we asked a group of 570 users what did they dislike the most when browsing the web on their mobile phone. The top answer, 46%, almost half of users, said waiting for slow pages to load. So think about it. Your users can be frustrated before they've even interacted with your website. It's not a good place. It's not a good position for them to be in if you want to get them to spend some money. Why should you care? Well, statistically, half of your newest customers are going to interact with your brand for the first time on a mobile device. Take a look at this chart here. As you can see, last November, mobile visits started to overtake desktop ones. You can see the desktop trend is going down and down, and the mobile trend is continuing to go up steadily, and we do expect that trend to continue. So half of your newest users will interact with your brand for the first time on a mobile device. And remember, you only ever get one chance to make a first impression with a customer. But this is not just about impressions. We want to drive conversions, right? So we worked with an external company to do some correlation between load time and conversion. So let's take a look at what we found here. So this line graph here shows the conversion rate. The bar chart shows the time in seconds. And what we see over here is that our top conversion rate was 1.9%. Now that might seem like a low number, but that's actually a pretty respectable number. If you think about desktop conversion is about on average 2.4%. So 1.9 on mobile is pretty good. Now when do we see this? We see this top conversion rate at a load time of 2.4 seconds. So that's pretty fast. If we go to 3.3 seconds, our conversion rate has dropped to 1.5%. If we get to 4.2, it's gone under 1%, so it's almost halved. And as you get to like 6 seconds loading time, and remember, you're still under the average here. The average in the US is 7 seconds. But if you get down to 6 seconds, it really just tapers off. It's not just about conversions. Users also just bounce. They just leave mobile websites if they don't load fast enough. So using the same data as the previous slide, we looked at the bounce rate according to load time. And here's what we found. As the load time goes from 1 to 3 seconds, the probability of the user bouncing increases 32%. As we get to 5 seconds, it increases 90%. And you can see it continues and continues to go up. So you're losing users. You're literally bleeding users as your load time goes up. Why else should you care? Well, there's this product out there called Google Search. Don't know if you heard of it. But as you probably know, we have a ranking algorithm to load search results. And there's lots of different inputs into this ranking algorithm, which I'm not going to share with you today. But page speed is one of those signals, right? So the speed your website loads at is a signal that will go into the search results. So in theory, it can help with your discoverability of your website as well. And also the ranking of your ads. The speed of your landing page, along with UX and content, directly affects what we call this quality score. And the quality score is used to determine the ad's position in the ranking. So again, faster websites can really help with your ad ranking. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what is a good load time? Well, we know 7 seconds is the average, and we know 7 seconds is not good, but what is a good load time? Well, if you ask our friend Jeff Bezos, he'll say under 1 second. Your target for latency is 1 second. And that's really fast, right? But we don't all have the means of Amazon. We don't all have the millions and millions of dollars he has. So what is a realistic good load time for your mobile sites? Well, think about the data we looked at before. So what we saw is that conversion starts to drop off after 2.4 seconds. We know that. We know that from this study. And we also know that bounce rates start to increase significantly at about 3 seconds. So our recommendation is if you're under 3 seconds, you're doing pretty well. So that's what you should be aiming for. So what do we look like in this room? Well, I ran a little experiment, and I looked at all your mobile websites. I loaded them all up, not manually. I wrote a little script to do it. Now, I did it on a 3G network, right? So this is not your fastest, okay? But this is typical user out and about, and they're loading your mobile site. So what does it look like? Well, 11 of you in the room are under that 3 second. So it's actually not terrible. But there's quite a lot of people here over 10 seconds. That's pretty slow. So this might seem like a little bit scary to you. These are pretty slow, but look, this just tells me that there's lots of opportunity here. There's probably lots of low-hanging fruit that you can easily fix on your website to make it faster. And we're going to talk about some of those things. So we believe winning on mobile is hard, but we do believe it's possible. There are some things you can do. So I'm going to talk about a few different things you can do to speed up your sites. I'm going to talk about the bigger things, the real investments you're going to make in your site, and then some of the quick wins you can do straight away that you can talk to developers, or if you're developers here in the room, that you can go back and easily do to your site. So I've thought about all these things, and I've come up with this list. And this list are the top 10 asks for your tech teams to help speed up your mobile websites. The first thing I'm going to talk about is AMP. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit already. AMP stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. So what's AMP? Well, AMP is a framework. It's a framework for building websites, and it optimizes for speed. It does a lot of this optimization automatically, so your developers don't even have to do anything manually. How does it do it? Well, there's a lot of ways it does it. I can give you some examples. So AMP uses a slightly different version of HTML. It's called AMP HTML. And that language is optimized to render much faster in a browser. So straight away, you're getting those quick wins. It also stores objects in the cache, right? So you don't have to, every object that's loaded onto your mobile site normally comes from the server, so it involves a round trip. AMP will automatically store them in the cache for you, so they're much faster to load. So what does AMP do? What's the impact of adding AMP to your website? Well, let's look at an example. So we worked with a retailer in France. They're an organic retailer, and they implemented AMP on their mobile site. And what did we see? Well, it's pretty dramatic. We saw that their increase in mobile page speed went up by 5x. So it became 5 times faster because of AMP. And what did that mean for their conversions? More importantly, we saw an 80% increase in mobile conversion rates. So AMP is a really powerful, a really impactful thing you can do to help speed up your websites. But what are some of the things you can do even faster? What are some of those low-hanging fruit, those quick wins that you can do to speed up your website? The first thing I would do is prioritize what we call above the fold. So on a mobile phone, the page loads. The portion that the user can actually see when the page first loads before they start to scroll, that's what we call above the fold. Really simple thing to do. Just load those things first, the things that they see. Everything else can be loading while they're reading that page before they scroll down. It's a really simple fix, really easy to do. Images. So let's talk a little bit about images. So on average, most of the loading size of web pages comes from images. They're pretty costly to load on a website. So take a look at the images that you're loading on your mobile site. Do you really need every single one of them? Because every image comes with a cost, and that cost is speed. And as we've seen, that means lower conversion. So once you've reduced it to those images that you really, really think are crucial, compress those images. So compression has come a long way in the last couple of years. There are some really good tools out there that will compress those images for you, and they'll compress them to make them much smaller in size, but the loss of quality is actually really, really small. Image Optim is an example of one tool that you can use to compress your images. Make it part of your build workflow. So as you're building your website, there's tools you can use to automatically compress your images, so they always, by default, get compressed. Lazy loading. This kind of relates to what we talked about before about above the fold, sort of. But only load your images if you need them. Don't load an image that's like way down on the page, because the user may never scroll to it. Only load it if they're really going to use it. Download and hide, download and shrink. What are those? Well, download and hide. So that means that an image is downloaded, but then the code hides it. Sometimes it's done as a quick fix. If you want to remove an image from your website and the developer just hides it instead of actually removes it. It's really common. But you're still incurring the cost of downloading that image, and you're not even showing it. So just make sure you're not doing that. Shrink, download and shrink is very similar. And it happens sometimes when you're using the same site for your desktop and your mobile, and you've got an image that appears really big on your desktop site, but appears small on your mobile device. And sometimes when you do that, the full-size image is downloaded to the mobile site and then shrunk. So don't do that. Shrink it, then download it. So these are pretty common sense ideas, as you can see. So what does this room look like? Well, as we expect, images take up a lot of bandwidth, but actually, in this room, JavaScript takes up more. It's not that much of a surprise when you think about it. Your e-commerce sites, and they're generally complex, dynamic, and they need to track a lot of data points. The recommendation, the industry standard recommendation, is to keep it below 500 kilobytes. So what can we do to get that down? Minify. Minify the code. Enable gzip to compress your code. It's really easy. You can also minify the code files. And when I say minify the code, so when a developer writes code, they put in lots of extra characters, spacing, indentation. They put comments in the code so that they can come back and understand it. Put comments in for other developers. It takes up a lot of space, and it bloats it. The server doesn't need any of that information. There's tools out there you can get to minify the files. You can automatically minify the file as it gets uploaded to the server, reduce the size a little bit. And refactor. So all the developers in the room will know what refactoring is. As you keep adding features to a website, they get tacked on. Sometimes the old ones don't get removed. They're not always optimized to be the most efficient way. So I recommend just maybe a quarterly practice of going in, getting a developer to go in and just say, is there any code in here that's not being used anymore? Because there's a cost incurred in loading that every time. Reducing the requests to the server. Industry standard, again, the recommendation for mobile websites is to load no more than 50 objects on a web page. Why do we want less objects? Well, loading an object generally requires a round trip to the server, which is time. So we recommend no more than 50. In this room, 74% of you have more than 50 resources. So it's just something to look at. It's usually images, could be HTML tags, whatever you've got that's loading. Do you take a look and really prioritize those ones you really need. Redirects. I think everyone knows about redirects. Everyone's encountered them. You type a URL in a browser, and it redirects you to another URL. But what happens behind the scenes? Well, let's take a look here. So if you load this URL in your browser, example.com, what happens? Well, the DNS server will do a lookup on example.com. We'll figure out where it needs to go. Where's the server? Where does it need to go to? Goes to the server, gets the data, sends the data back to the browser. In this case, the data just says, nope, you're at the wrong site. Go to m.example.com. So m.example.com goes into the browser. Again, the browser needs to do another DNS lookup, figures out where it needs to go, goes to the server, gets the data. In this case, comes back, says, nope, you need to go to m.example.com/product. Again, it needs to go to the server, get the data, bring it back. So If you're aiming for under 3 seconds, this is really hard, because all those trips to the server are taking time. Redirects, my advice, just get rid of them if you can. There's lots of other ways to do this. If a user types in example.com, you can do a check on your end and say, is this coming from a mobile device? If so, just load the information straight here. You're saving those 2 round trips. So it's a complete waste of time. So in summary, here are my top asks for tech teams to speed up their mobile sites. Try AMP. We've seen it. It really is impactful. It's one of the bigger things to do, but it's incredibly impactful. The quicker wings, prioritizing above the fold, that portion of the site that the user sees right away before scrolling. Optimize your images or remove them if you don't need them. Minify your code, remove all those characters that the server doesn't need. Reduce your requests to the server. That's about the objects, less than 50 objects loading in each page. And reduce, in my opinion, eliminate those redirects. So hopefully that's useful. That helps you meet your goals. Some big things, some quick wins you can do. Thank you. Any questions?